Moral dilemma. Moral conflict and dilemma. Moral conflict is a fact of moral life. It is something that we can never do away with. It is embedded in the crucial decisions that we make, particularly in the moments that we are faced with what is and what should be. A dilemma is a situation where a person is forced to choose between two or more conflicting options, neither of which is acceptable. As we can see, the key here is that the person has choices to make that will all have result he or she does not want. When dilemmas involve human action, moral implications, they are called ethical or moral dilemmas. Moral dilemmas arise due to inconsistency in our principle. In understanding the morality of an individual, we need to emphasize that the majority of moral persons are those who sturdily disposed to stand fast by the reflectively chosen principles and ideals when tempted by the consideration chosen that are morally irrelevant. A moral conflict is a situation in which a person has two moral obligations which cannot be met both at once. Behind these obligations lies conflicting values. A moral dilemma is an irresolvable moral conflict.
Types of moral dilemma. Number 1. Epistemic moral dilemmas. Involved situation wherein two or more moral requirements conflict with each other and that the moral agent hardly knows which of the conflicting moral requirements takes precedence over the other. In other words, the moral agent here does not know which option is morally right or wrong. In this dilemma, you don't know what is the wrong or right in one situation. For example, I thought to honor my promise to my son to be home early, but on my way home I saw a sick old man who needs to be brought to the hospital. Where does my actual duty lie? Where we cannot deny that there are conflicting duties. Here, but we need to note that we want a fuller knowledge of the situation. Is an important purpose being served by my getting home early? How serious is the condition of the sick old man? Indeed, I could hardly decide which option is morally right in this situation. However, one option must be better than the other one. Only it needs fuller knowledge of the situation, the term epistemic moral dilemmas. Next one is ontological moral dilemmas. Involve situation wherein two or more moral dilemmas requirements conflict which other yet neither of these conflicting moral requirement overrides each other. This is not to say that the moral agent does not know which moral requirement is stronger than the other. The point is that neither of the moral requirements is stronger than the other. Hence, the moral agent can hardly choose between the conflicting moral requirements. For example, a military doctor is attending to the needs of the wounded soldiers in the middle of the war. Unfortunately, two soldiers urgently need a transfusion. However, only one bag of blood is available at the moment. To whom should the doctor administer the blood transfusion? For sure, we could not tell whether administering a transfusion to soldier A is more moral than administering a blood transfusion to soldier B, and vice versa. Next is self-imposed moral dilemma. Self-imposed moral dilemma happens when an agent made two promises that he knew conflicted, then through his action, he created a situation in which it is not possible for him to discharge both of his requirements. For example, David is running for the position of the town mayor. During the campaign period, he promised the indigenous people in his community to protect their virgin forest just to gain their votes. But at the same time, he seeks financial support from a mining corporation. Fortunately, David won the elections. Yet he is faced with the dilemma of fulfilling his promise to the indigenous people and at the same time allows the mining corporation to destroy their forest. Indeed, through his own action, David created a situation in which it is impossible for him to be discharged from both obligations. Next one is world-imposed moral dilemmas. On the other hand, world-imposed moral dilemma occurs when events beyond other control cause an unavoidable moral conflict. An individual must resolve a moral dilemma even though the cause of it is beyond his or her control.
The obligation dilemma. The social worker refers to the situation in which the fundamental obligation to the client may conflict with obligation to the employer of the client's family. For example of the obligation dilemma. Because of his condition, it's impossible to say that he cannot obligate to jump in and save the drowning man. He is not obligated to do so because he cannot do so. Number 4. Single agent dilemma. In the other words, the moral agent is compelled to act on two or more equally the same moral option, but she cannot choose both. Example of single agent dilemma. Jamie is at the pool alone when she sees two boys fall into the pool. She can only save one, but both should be saved.
Here are the three levels of ethical dilemma in the workplace. First, individual or micro level. Second, organizational or meso level. And the third one is systemic macro level. So the individual or micro level is the dilemma here is when the employee's ethical standards are in opposition to that of his or her employer, which could lead to tension in workplace. And the second one is organizational or meso level. It is an ethical standards are seen in company policies. It still there might be a gap between those who run the business whose ethical standard deviate from that of the organization. And the last one is the systemic macro level. Ethics here is predisposed by the larger operating environment of the company. Political pressures, economic conditions, societal attitudes, and others can affect the operating standards and policies of the organization where it might face moral dilemma outside of the organization but within the macro society where it belongs.
Good afternoon, ma'am. This is the continuation of levels of ethical dilemmas in the workplace. And there have 10 chapters and theses. The first one is ethics is only concerned with values, with those ideas that attempt to prescribe the way things ought to be. Second is ethic chooses to focus its energies on out statements that go well beyond themselves by prescribing moral standard if they are right and wrong to a group or universally to all human beings. Third one is the moral statements are normative rather than factual. Therefore, a normative statement expresses a values judgment, a kind of judgment that claims that something ought to be the case as distinct from a factual judgment that claims that sometimes is the case. 5. There are other normative standards that are not necessary moral standards, such as standards of etiquette, law, language, aesthetics, and athletics. Number 6 is moral standards deal with matters that we think can seriously harm or benefit human being. They have universal validity. They are generally thought to have a particularly overriding importance, that is, people feel they should prevail over other values. They are not established by the decision of authoritarian bodies, nor are they socially determined by a feeling to consensus or tradition. Number 7 is a moral conflict. It's a situation in which a person has two moral obligations which cannot be met both and once, but can be resolved without leaving behind any regrettable reminder or residue. Number 8 is a moral dilemma is an irresolvable moral conflict, i.e., no fully satisfactory resolution is possible, since all possible options for action leave behind a remainder that does not cease to be morally binding. Number 9, moral dilemmas arise due to consistency in our principles. This is our 12 syntax. This is a 12 chapter synthesis pal. Number 10. Moral dilemmas vary in types such as epistemic and ontological, self-imposed and world-imposed, obligation and prohibition, single agent and multi-person. Number 11 is moral dilemmas are experienced in the individual, organizational, and systemic level. And the last one is moral distress arise when one knows the right things to do, but institutional constraints makes it nearly impossible to pursue the right course of action. And that's all. Thank you.